Do you find that working with people, in particular across borders and cultures, leads to frequent misunderstanding and frustration? The book The Culture Map by Erin Meyer sheds light on the invisible cultural and business norms of different countries and helps to prevent these issues from arising. This video will outline the key takeaways from the book, give examples of intercultural issues and why they emerge, and describe some practical tips for overcoming or preventing intercultural communication problems. Meyer argues that culture plays a significant role in how we communicate, lead, and get things done. She identifies 8 dimensions along which cultures vary: communicating, evaluating, persuading, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. A culture that values direct communication may be seen as rude or aggressive by a culture that values indirect communication. For example, a direct communicator from the United States might say to a Japanese colleague that their presentation was terrible. This could seem as a personal attack by the Japanese colleague, who might be more indirect in their communication. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different communication styles of different cultures and to adjust your own communication style accordingly. Sweden is one of the most direct cultures in the world. Swedes are not afraid to say what they mean, even if it is something negative. In contrast, countries like Japan and China are more indirect cultures. People from these cultures may avoid saying anything that could be seen as negative, even if it means being less clear. A culture that values formal evaluations and feedback may be seen as too critical by a culture that does not place much emphasis on formal evaluation. For example, a manager from the United States might give their employees formal performance reviews every 6 months. This could be seen as micromanaging by an employee from a culture that does not value formal evaluation. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different approaches to evaluation in different cultures and to find a way to balance the needs of both. Germany is one of the cultures that places the highest emphasis on formal evaluation and feedback. Germans believe that it is important to provide clear and constructive feedback to employees so that they can improve their performance. In contrast, countries like the United States and Brazil place less emphasis on formal evaluations and feedback. In these cultures, feedback is often given informally, and it may not always be direct or constructive. A culture that prefers to be persuaded by logic and facts may be seen as cold and unfeeling by a culture that prefers to be persuaded by emotion. For example, a salesperson from the United States might try to persuade a customer to buy a product by listing all of the features and benefits of the product. This could be seen as too clinical by a customer from a culture that prefers to be persuaded by emotional appeals. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different ways that people are persuaded in different cultures and to tailor your persuasion techniques accordingly. The United States is one of the most direct and assertive cultures in the world. Americans are not afraid to state their opinions and to persuade others to see things their way, although it should be noted that this is not the case when evaluating. In contrast, countries like China and Japan are more indirect and less assertive. People from these cultures may be more reluctant to state their opinions, and they may prefer to persuade others indirectly, through subtle hints and suggestions. A culture that values autocratic leadership may be seen as oppressive by a culture that values democratic leadership. For example, a manager from China might make all of the decisions for their team without consulting them. This could be seen as unfair by a team member from a culture that values democratic leadership. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different leadership styles in different cultures and to try to find a balance between them. Often, leadership styles in different cultures are differentiated by different levels of transparency. China is one of the most hierarchical cultures in the world. Chinese people believe that leaders should be respected and they should have a lot of power. In contrast, countries like Sweden and the United States are more egalitarian cultures. In these cultures, leaders are expected to be more collaborative and less authoritarian. A culture that makes decisions by consensus may be seen as indecisive by a culture that makes decisions quickly. For example, a team from Sweden might spend weeks discussing and debating a decision before making their final choice. This could be seen as a waste of time by a team from the United States, which might make a decision quickly without consulting everyone. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different decision-making processes in different cultures. Israel is one of the quickest and most decisive cultures in the world. Israelis are not afraid to make decisions quickly, even if they are not perfect. In contrast, countries like Japan and Germany are more deliberate cultures. People from these cultures prefer to take more time to make decisions and gather more opinions and more information. A culture that takes time to develop trust may be seen as untrustworthy by a culture that trusts people quickly. For example, a business partner from India might take months to develop trust with a business partner from the United States. This could be seen as a lack of interest by the business partner from the United States. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different trust-building processes in different cultures, and be patient with people from cultures that take longer to develop trust. Colombia is one of the quickest cultures to trust others. Colombians are very open and friendly, and they are quick to develop relationships with others. In contrast, countries like Japan and China are more cautious. People from these cultures may be more reluctant to trust others, and they may want to get to know someone better before they begin to trust them, even in a business context. A culture that disagrees directly may be seen as aggressive by a culture that disagrees indirectly. For example, a colleague from Germany might disagree with a colleague from Japan by saying, "I think your idea is wrong." This could be seen as rude by the Japanese colleague, who might be more indirect in their disagreements. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different ways that people disagree in different cultures, and to find a way to be constructive. France is one of the most direct and open cultures when it comes to disagreeing with others. French people are not afraid to speak their minds, even if it means disagreeing and conflict. In contrast, countries like Japan and China are more indirect and less open. People from these cultures may be more reluctant to disagree with others. They may avoid saying the word no, and they may prefer to avoid conflict altogether. A culture that views time as linear may be seen as inflexible by a culture that views time as more fluid. For example, a meeting planner from Germany might schedule a meeting for 9 a.m. sharp. This could be seen as unreasonable by a meeting planner from Brazil, who might not be able to guarantee that everyone will be available at 9 a.m. sharp. To avoid this problem, it is important to be aware of the different views of time in different cultures and be flexible when scheduling meetings and deadlines. Brazil is one of the most loosely scheduled cultures in the world. Brazilians are not afraid to be flexible and to change plans at the last minute. In contrast, countries like Germany and Japan are more tightly scheduled cultures. People from these cultures prefer to have a clear plan and stick to it. Some of these comparisons may seem counterintuitive, but it is important to note that a person's cultural background and business background both play a role in creating a complex map of pathways that they choose to take in their working life. Be careful not to generalize too much or misattribute something to the wrong category. Meyer argues that understanding these cultural differences can help us to avoid misunderstandings and build stronger relationships with people from other cultures. Let's look at a few examples of potential cultural misunderstandings. A Japanese manager is used to making decisions by consensus, which means that everyone involved in a decision must agree before it can be made. Their American staff members, on the other hand, are used to making decisions quickly and independently. This may lead to a lot of misunderstanding and frustration. For example, the Japanese manager might have wanted to get input from everyone on the team before making a decision. American engineers, on the other hand, might have wanted to just make the decision and move on. This could have led to the Japanese manager feeling like they were not being listened to, their authority was not respected, and the American engineers may feel like they are being held back. A British manager is used to being very direct in his communication style. He would say exactly what he meant, even if it was something negative. British feedback style is not as completely open as Dutch or Swedish, and it is somewhat indirect like the American criticism sandwich. But for negative things, some cultures are even more discreet than that. Chinese employees are used to being more indirect. They might avoid saying anything that could be seen as negative, even if it meant being less clear. For example, the British manager might tell a Chinese employee that their work was not good enough. The Chinese employee might have been offended by this because they might have interpreted it as a personal attack. Some cultures see criticism as personal, while others see it as strictly a reflection of one job or one task. They may still feel bad, but it is more part of their expectations of their work. A French employee with an American manager, on the other hand, may feel that they are doing excellent work even after receiving an American's version of bad feedback, because they are not used to couched negativity being significant in the same way that Americans are. A Mexican manager may be used to taking a long time to build trust. They want to get to know their employees on a personal level before they can really trust them. The German employees, on the other hand, may be used to doing business quickly. They want to get down to business right away and don't see the need to build up a personal relationship first. A Mexican manager might want to spend time getting to know his German employees outside of work. The German employees, on the other hand, might feel frustrated by this because they want to get on with their work and not take too much time in what they may see as frivolous exercises. These are just a few examples of how cultural differences can lead to misunderstandings and problems in the workplace. By understanding these differences, we can adjust our communication style and behavior to accommodate the other person's culture. This will help us to build stronger relationships and achieve our goals more effectively. In each of these cases, the problems could have been avoided if the people involved had been more aware of the cultural differences that existed. By understanding these differences, they could have adjusted their communication style and behavior to accommodate the other person's culture. This would have helped them to build stronger relationships and achieve their goals more effectively. Here are some practical tips for overcoming and preventing intercultural communication problems. Be very aware of cultural differences. The first step to overcoming intercultural communication problems is to be aware of the cultural differences that exist. This means being aware of the different communication styles, different values, and different norms that exist in different cultures. Be aware of your own cultural biases as well. We all have our own cultural biases, which can lead us to misinterpret the behavior of other people. It is important to be aware of our own biases so that we can avoid making assumptions about people from other cultures. Be flexible and adaptable. It's important to be flexible when working with people from other cultures. It means being willing to adjust our communication style and behavior to accommodate the other person's culture. Be open to feedback. It's important to be open to feedback from people from other cultures. This feedback can help you understand how your communication style is being perceived and how you can improve it. Ask questions. If you're unsure about something, don't be afraid to ask. Asking questions is a great way to learn more about the other person's culture and to avoid misunderstandings. Build relationships. It is important to build relationships with the people from other cultures. This can help you to develop trust and understanding, which can make it easier for you to communicate more effectively. Benefit of the doubt is a fairly common cultural norm. Last of all, be patient. It takes time to build trust and understanding across cultures. Be patient and don't expect to overcome these differences overnight. By following these tips, you can help to overcome intercultural communication problems and build stronger relationships with people from other cultures, which in turn will lead to greater efficiency and greater happiness in your working life.
MA